Hello YouTube and welcome to today's video. In today's video we are gonna be talking a little bit about the best amount of champions that you can play, basically your champion pool in Soloq in order to climb. And in the background we are watching me play Kha'Zix versus Artis in Masters Elo. And if I'm looking to the left here, then it is because I have a bunch of notes that I will be reading from. So, I got first blood, good shit, I'm smurfing already. The first thing is you can be a one trick. So, if you are one trick, there are some pros and cons. So, the pros are that you only need to learn one champion, whichever champion it is that you decide to play. And besides that, you only need to learn the different matchups in the given role that you play for one champion. So you will basically learn the matchups fairly fast, while also getting better at your champion. Then the next thing is that you only have to learn one set of items. And I'll give you guys an example. I was a one trick of Kha'Zix back in Season 6. I played only Kha'Zix for the entire season for about 500 games. And I learned how the different lethality items worked on Kha'Zix. So what I mean by this is that you will learn specifically when is the different items slightly better than the other one depending on the different team comps. So when is a Ghost Blade better than an Edge of Night? When is Serpent's Fang better than Ghost Blade? When should you go Eclipse? When should you go Prowess? When should you go Duskblade? When should you go more lethality? When should you go more armor pen? All these questions I could now answer after playing Kha'Zix because I was only playing the lethality build. So you don't need to learn AP items or tank items if you're playing an AD assassin champion. And then the more you play, the more you learn when are the different items better in the given situation, because you're not gonna buy the same 6 items every single game for about 95% of the champions that are in League. Then the next thing is that now that you've learned your champion fairly fast, because you're only playing this one champion, you can now focus on get a better understanding of how the role works. So for me, it was back again in Season 6, I was playing Kha'Zix, and I didn't have to think about, oh, what should I upgrade here, or how should I play Kha'Zix, what should I build? I knew exactly how my champion functioned, and then I could focus on, well, how does jungle work as a role? So what does tempo mean? When should I invade? How should I gank? Etc, and get a better understanding of how my role and how the game works, rather than focusing on how does this champion work that I ended up picking. And then the last thing is that you're gonna reach the skill ceiling of the champion much faster than if you play multiple champions. So every single champion have a different skill ceiling, meaning that, I'll give an example, a champion like Annie has a low skill ceiling because there's not that much skill expression. You don't have to do that many different combos and learn different combos. If you compare this champion to Lee Sin, then Lee Sin has many different combos and a lot of skill shots even, that you simply need to learn in order to be a good Lee Sin player. So it's easier to be a good Annie player than it is to be a good Lee Sin player. But with being a one trick, there are also a bunch of cons. And the first thing is that you can be banned out. So especially if you're playing a very popular champion, your champion can be banned out, meaning that you are forced to dodge. Then the second thing is that your champion can also get picked. Again, if your champion is very popular, there's a big chance that it will get picked and you are again then forced to dodge. Then the third thing is that you have no chance of counter picking. And I've previously experienced this myself, that you hate to be the early pick, because if you early pick, you will most likely get counter picked. But if the enemy picks a champion that counters your champion and you're late pick, you don't have the option to go for a counter pick due to the fact that you only play one champion. So for the most part, it's better for you to basically be the first pick or ask the team to say, yo, first pick me my champion, and then give them the counter matchup, because you are not capable of doing it with such a small champion pool of only one champion. And this also means that, again, you can be forced to picking into counter picks, which sounds really bad, and typically it is, But if you just have a better understanding of the matchup than your opponent, then you can still win these matchups, or you can again simply dodge. Then the next thing is that you have no chance of providing anything for a specific team comp. So let's say there is a given wombo combo, you cannot provide anything to that wombo combo due to the fact that you only play one champion. This also means that you don't have any adaptation, meaning that if there's 4 AD champions on the team and you are last pick and your one trick champion is a AD champion, well, then again, you most likely are forced to dodge. And then the last thing, this is a thing that I've seen a ton of people ask me about, and that is, what if I get bored of that champion? Isn't it boring playing the same champion? And to that question, I have always said that it's all about finding the right champion. This is why I never suggest people to play XYZ champion, because you need to be capable of playing the champion for literally 100 games in a row. And if there's not a champion that you enjoy that much that you can play it for 100 games in a row, then first thing I would say is that you probably haven't tried all the champions. But if you have tried all the champions and there's not a champion that you would like to play 100 games in a row, then you're simply not a player that is capable of becoming one trick, and you then are forced to picking more champions up in your champion pool. So, is one tricking a good thing in solo queue? For LP, it is good. You are most definitely gonna be getting higher elo in terms of LP by simply playing one champion compared to playing multiple champions. But it's not gonna make you a better player overall, due to the fact there are many concepts of the game that you will never be in a situation where you will learn about those situations, and therefore you will be a higher elo player compared to a person that is equal skill level to you, simply because you only play one champion. But that player that is lower elo will have a better understanding overall of the game. So if you strictly care about LP and not about becoming a good player and understanding the game good, then one tricking is for you basically. But let's say you don't want to be a one trick. What other options are there? Well, there are the options of having a small champion pool. And a small champion pool is what I consider 2 to 4 champions. So 2 to 4 champions is a fairly small champion pool, but is still good for solo queue. So the pros of having 2 to 4 champions in your champion pool rather than being just a one trick is that you still have a small champion pool, so that you most likely learn the champions that you're playing in a fairly small amount of time. Then the next thing is that it gives you the ability to adapt to a certain extent to different team comps. Because most likely when you're playing 2 to 4 different champions, you're not going to be picking 4 champions that are very, very similar. Meaning that you're not looking to pick 4 AD champions or 4 AP champions, or 4 champions that more or less do the same thing. You're more or less likely to go some smaller variations, maybe in terms of damage output, maybe in terms of engage, maybe in terms of damage, maybe some peeler, who knows. But what I'm getting at is basically you most likely will have different types of champions that can provide certain things to a team comp and kind of basically provide something for that wombo combo and help the team in that way. Then the next thing is that you're not going to get banned out, because there's no way that the enemy team is going to be banning 4 champions. If you only play 2 or 3 champions, there is a small chance, but most likely you're not going to get banned out. Meaning that you have to dodge less times. Then the next thing is that you now have the option to counter pick, meaning that if the enemy team has first pick, then you can basically counter pick them and then have an easy matchups and overall have a fairly easy and good game that you can then play. And then for yourself, you can then avoid being counter pick yourself due to the fact that you have multiple champions that you can swap in between. And then the last thing is that it gives you a better understanding of the game or of your role overall, due to the fact that you will get an understanding of the role from different point of views, from different champions' point of view, and therefore you will have a better understanding of the game that you can both utilize for when you play, but also for when you play against certain champions. The cons of this is that you are of course not going to reach your skill ceiling as fast, because you now have to play between 2 and 4 champions compared to just playing one champion over and over again. And the next thing is that it can still be boring for some players to only play 2 to 4 champions. Now I think that most of the player base by far could stick to just 2 to 4 champions and not have any issues, but there are some players that simply want to play even more champions, and to that I will say that if you're bored, then try out other champions, either on a Smurf account or something else, and don't do it on your main account thinking that you can play 10 different champions in the same elo that you peaked in, because you can simply not. And then the last thing is that obviously it will take a bit longer for you to become really good at all these champions, compared to if you just play one single champion that you then have to become good at. In terms of elo, it is still a very effective way to gain elo, and it will definitely help you become a better player, but I don't think in terms of elo that you will be gaining as much LP compared to just becoming a one trick. Now the last thing is that you can have a champion pool ocean. And a champion pool ocean doesn't really have a certain amount of champions in it, but it just means that you can play like most of the champions in the given role. The pros of this is that you have really good adaptation. Like you can any type of team comp can be thrown at you, and you can still provide something for the team comp and be helpful in terms of the wombo combo. You can always counter pick, so you should always have a fairly easy game if you are a late pick. And you can avoid getting counter picked yourself, meaning that you more or less always will have some good matchups due to the fact that some champions are pretty good to blind pick, and other champions are really good to use as a counter pick. So as long as you have both good blind pick and counter picks, you more or less always should have a somewhat even skill level. The cons of this is that it takes extremely long to get good at all of these different champions. It will take years and years and years of playing every single day in order for you to reach this level. And this is pretty much only good for players that want to play professionally, who want to play competitively. And even those type of players do not play, let's say, 20 different champions in a given role. Due to the fact that they mostly play the meta stuff that is coming out every single patch, and then it basically rotates more or less every single patch. Then the next thing is that you will have a low skill level expression, meaning that you'll have a more or less steady gameplay in majority of your games, but you will never be the 1v9 carry due to the fact that you are almost never going to reach the skill ceiling of the given champion that you're playing, because you're playing so many different champions. And then the last thing are you're not fully gonna understand the champions that you're playing in terms of itemization, specifically for the champion, and in terms of different situations where you need some adaptation within the game. You might not have the specific knowledge that you'll need in order to do the correct adaptation in terms of items or playstyle, or whatever it might be, in order to basically be stronger than if you just played like you normally would play the champion. So in terms of elo, I will say that this will slower the progress of you climbing by a ton, and I actually think it will more or less actually hurt you, meaning that over the course of even a few months, you are basically not only gonna be at the same elo, but potentially actually go down in terms of elo. And the last thing is that I believe that you will reach a much lower skill cap and basically elo cap compared to if you're playing just a few champions, because you cannot play every single champion to the same level, because different champions require different types of mechanics and knowledge, and basically the skill ceiling is different. And I believe that you're simply gonna be much lower elo if you go for a champion pool ocean compared to a one trick or just a small champion pool. So what is the best for solo queue specifically? If you strictly want to focus on elo, I would suggest that you become a one trick. If you are focusing both on elo, but also the learning aspect of understanding the game and understanding potentially multiple roles, or get the point of view from multiple champions and types of champions, I would suggest going for a small champion pool between 2 and 4 champions. And if you plan on going for the competitive route and saying I want to play competitive, then if you are already high elo, then sure, you can then expand your champion pool. But if you're not already at the top of the ladder, then there's no point for you in already adding different champions, because it's not the different champions that is going to give you a certain elo. It is the understanding of the game, understanding of your own role, understanding of every single role in the entire game, and how the different roles synergize and work together, and also how the different team comps work. So it doesn't really matter what type of champion that you're playing, at least up until Diamond, maybe even up until Masters. But if you want to grind for Grandmaster Challenger, obviously there are certain champions that are simply not being played in that elo because they are simply too weak compared to the meta. And in high elo, you're basically more or less following the meta, unless if you're really good at one specific champion, and that champion is not too bad in the current meta that it's in. So even if you want to play competitively, have a small champion pool, get good at the game, get high rank, and then expand your champion pool afterwards. So my personal recommendation, become a one trick or have a small champion pool. Do not have a champion pool ocean. Don't play multiple roles. And I see a ton of players that I've coached in iron, bronze, silver, gold, even plat, do this mistake of thinking that they can play all sorts of different champions, and they play them for 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 games, and they have a 0 to 40% win rate on them, basically meaning that they are lowering their own MMR and slowing their progress in terms of climbing the Soloq ladder. So if you enjoyed this video, then leave a like. If you have any comments or any feedback or any questions to this video, then leave it in the comment section down below. I will reply to all the comments within the next month or so. And if you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Then otherwise, I hope to see you guys in the next YouTube video or on my next live stream on Twitch. And I ended up winning this game, by the way, with 22 and 8 or some shit. But yeah, thank you for watching, and see you guys. Bye bye.